Hello, this is Kyle, also known as Alien Dude. Today talking about a recent cutting tournament that I entered. This was the Babymoon tournament and it was held at SoCal Swords last weekend. It was in honor of one of the prominent members of SoCal Swords, AJ. He's going to be having a baby soon and they wanted to do a tournament to celebrate that. So I entered it. There was an open cutting and advanced cutting. They basically blended the two of them together. The open cutters didn't compete against the advanced cutters, but we did basically the same feats, just the advanced cutters had modifications to those feats. The tournament runners were Dan Chung and AJ, and both of them are friends of mine. So even though I would have wanted to go anyways, I had to go to support them. So I figured let's go ahead and do a video showing my performance and me going through the footage and explaining what was going on, explaining the feats, talk about what I need to do to improve. So hopefully this will work. I am kind of doing this with a different setup than I normally do, so excuse me if there's a little bit of technical difficulties. I'm trying my best. So we have here a video I created of the two different video sources I have. The one on the left, the bigger one, is the one that my wife captured on phone while I was competing, and then the one on the right, the judges were capturing as well. I tried to sync them up so that they're at the exact same time. There might be a frame or two difference. So let's go ahead and start by looking at the first feat. Go ahead. So the first feat is the 6 basic cuts. This is on paper. The basic cuts being 2 Oberhaus, 1 from each side, 2 Unterhaus, 1 from each side, and then you could either do Mittelhaus or Zwerghaus, 1 from each side. And this was, like I said, on paper, and they required a step with every cut. So let's go through it and see how I do. And we also had to use a loaner sword. We could not use our own swords. There was a paper cutting sword, which was the prize of the open tournament, and then there was also a Tatami cutting sword. So you can see I'm going through, I did a right Oberhau there, the paper landed on my sword. They would lower it down for each cut, asked us not to have it lowered too much to conserve paper. I went for the pattern of Oberhau and then Unterhau from the opposite angle, because that conserves a little bit more paper and there's a lot less chance of mountaining when you're not doing crisscrossing every single time. And they asked us what our feat was, or what cut we were doing. You tell them, then you wait for them to say, go ahead, and then you can go ahead and deliver. A little faster than you. So this is pretty basic stuff here, right? It's the 6 basic cuts. It's something I've practiced a lot on, so it's something I feel pretty confident in. Now, one thing I did notice is on my 2 Unterhaus, I didn't do a passing step. I just did a very small lunging step. And I thought I got a deduction for that, but I didn't. I did get a deduction. We'll talk about the scoring in just a minute. I did not go for Zwerghaus because I barely practiced Zwerghaus at all. That's basically a horizontal cut. How well you can see that, but it's above your head for the most part. I went with Mittelhaus because it's what I'm more familiar with. That was the 6 basic cuts on paper. I'm going to bring up the scoring here, if I did this right. Okay. And so this is my scoring on the first round. Each cut was worth a maximum of 20 points, and as you can see, I only got 1 deduction of 3 points. This is not necessarily the order the cuts were done in. I believe it was something like Oberhau, Oberhau, Unterhau, Unterhau, Mittelhaus, Zwerghaus, Mittelhaus, Zwerghaus. I'm not sure the exact order, but this does not mean I necessarily got the deduction on the 5th cut. It's just the 5th cut in whatever order they had it in. I thought, like I said, I thought I might have got a deduction for doing the kind of lunging step, but I did that twice and I only got 1 deduction. Not sure what the deduction was for. Probably either a small scoop. There might have been 1 small mountain, or there might have been like a little bit of off balance somewhere. I'm not sure, but I basically got 117 out of 120 points. I was thrilled with this result, especially because that was the top score in this specific feat. So off to a good start, right? And then next we move on to semaphores. This is pretty much a bog standard semaphores. The camera, or there's a screen showing me what cut to do, and I do that cut. I have to get back behind this tape before the cut indicator is gone. That cut I did wasn't great. There you can see a little bit of a scoop right there, and the first cut I cut a little bit too much. Pretty happy with that one. Again, I was a little too greedy on that cut, but not too bad. Perfectly happy with that cut. That is my worst cut in semaphores. I have been working on straightening out my Unterhaus. There I did a big scoop, and that was a failed cut. Another pretty clean cut there. Getting dangerously low on Tatami, though. And another good one. And there was one more cut here. And let me pause that. So there was one more cut I could have done. That was a Unterhau from the right. And I figured with that little amount, I was going to hit the spike. I didn't want to destroy the spike, especially with a loner sword, not my own sword. So I was like, I'm done here. And for the scoring, I got, let's go back. And let's see if HEMA scorecard will cooperate. Each cut was again worth 20 points, a total of 8 cuts, a maximum of 160 points. I got the exact same score as I did in the first round, 117. Only one deduction. There was that one failed cut on the big scoop, and then one completely missed cut because I didn't attempt it. So after the first round, this was the first elimination. They had 2 feats, then they eliminated, there was 20-something competitors in the low 20s, if I remember right. And I think they took the top 14 after this round. And after this, I was in first place. Very happy with that performance. I was just ahead of John Knock, who's also a friend. Keep an eye on that name. So the next round, or the next feat was, if I can get this to cooperate. There we go. All right, so next is thrust to controlled cut, and this one's going to require some explanation. So let's bring up my paper. So this was thrust to controlled cut on paper. The idea is you have 4 different circles here. You had to start by thrusting into one of the circles, get all the way through, wait for the judges to tell you, okay, they scored the thrust, extract, and then do a cut to one of the lines nearest the circle. You had to, and without going past the line. If you cut past the line, no points at all. And you had to do one right Oberhau, one left Oberhau, one left Unterhau, one left or right Unterhau. So one of each of those 4 basic cuts. And this was tricky. This is something I've never done before. I've never tried these controlled cuts. What they do is after you cut it, or after they take you finish your feat, they take the paper and they measure how far your cuts went, how far away from the line they were, and you get deductions based on the distance. I think it was like 2 points per inch, something like that, deduction. So you can see here, just from the results, I didn't get very close to the lines very often because, again, this is not something I really had done at all, and I didn't want to overswing and cut too far. So we'll come back to that, and we'll watch the cutting, and then I will show you the paper a bit more. So there's some strategy here in determining which cuts to do in which circle, and I kind of went with what everybody was doing, which was, you'll see the pattern here. We did not need to step during any of this. This was a failed thrust. I did not make it through the paper there. Okay. That was my best there too. So before we go to the next feat. So I started with this one. You can see just barely see the incision, the thrust point right there. Then I did a Unterhau that was way off, frankly. Too high, not deep enough. They measured the distance at 3.25, so I assume that's 3.25 inches away. That's a deduction of at least 6 points, I believe. Then I thrust over here. It's right there. Got a little bit better of a cut here, but still quite a distance from where we wanted it. I thrust in here. I failed this thrust. My cut was not nearly deep enough, 5 inches. That probably means minus 10 points, which is no points for the cut at all. And then this thrust, it's actually like right through the forehead of the little smiley face. I don't know if that got scored because it was barely in the circle. It was in the circle, but it was also out of the circle. But my cut was considerably better. It was considerably deeper, but it was still 2.5 inches, it looks like, from the line. So not a particularly great score here. Let's see, I will bring up the scoring if I can. Eliminations 2. Here we go. So yeah, I only got 33 points. I believe these were worth 20 points per feat, or per cut, thrust to cut. So yeah, that would be 80 points. I only got 33. Not a good score. This was a pretty rough score for me, and it almost immediately dropped me out of contention for finals, because even though I had a very, very good first round, my score here was just not sufficient. But moving back to the rest of the cutting, so there's that. And then the next is thrust to cut on Tatami. And you had 4 thrusts and 4 cuts. And what's different about this thrust to cut feat is that you couldn't do the same cut each time. It again had to be one of each Oberhau and one of each Unterhau. And that's a considerable change to how I normally do thrust to cut. It made me stop and think about my cuts more than I should have. And it threw me for a loop somewhat. And you'll see what I mean in just a minute. And we do have to get through the tatami mat.
You may begin.
Thrust.
Yep.
I think I got through there, but it's hard to say. I think I got through. And I struggled with extracting the sword so much. And I got a warning here. You'll probably hear it in just a second, because I did a descending cut towards my lead leg. And in this tournament, if you cut towards your descending cut towards the lead leg, the first time was a warning, the second time was disqualification. That is the first time I've ever cut towards my lead leg in a competition, I think. And it's because I was struggling with extracting the sword. That threw me for a loop, because I usually don't. And then also thinking about the cutting, even though that's a pretty normal descending cut for me, thinking about which cuts I would need to do was just getting in my head some, which is exactly why they did it, I'm sure.
Real quick.
Yeah, here's where
I cut towards the lead leg, so first warning.
Judges that I cut towards my lead leg.
Next cut?
So I'm calling out the next cut. I definitely did not make it through there. I'm waiting for them to score the thrust and let me know it's okay. Again, struggle. And I threw that. So luckily we got one respike here. But what happened there is, once again, getting in my own head about what cut to do, and it was a bad cut. It was honestly a terrible cut. I didn't accelerate the tip. It was just a bad cut. And it's mostly because I was in my own head about, I've never done a thrust to a Unterhau before. I'm not sure how to do that. So they respiked it.
Left.
Okay.
I was off center here quite a bit, but at least I did make it through. And perfectly good cut. That was overall pretty happy with that result. Now I have to do an Unterhau from the right side, which is my weakest cut. believe I did make it through there. Struggled with the extraction. So I did de-spike it there. That was a deal because I made it through the cut. And it was a good cut. The judges actually had the tatami picked up and inspected and like, yeah, it was a good cut. So let's bring up the scoring again. And thrust to cut. This was worth, I believe this was worth a total of 160 points. 20 for the, it was either 30 or 40 per cut, per feet. I can actually bring it up now that I think about it. Let's see. So the thrust was worth 10 and then the cut was worth 20. So 120 points possible on that feat. And I didn't do very well here. I got half score basically. So I struggled with extraction. I didn't have great cuts. I didn't have great thrusts. It was not a good feat for me. One thing I'm trying to figure out is, and I think I know what's going on. I'm trying to figure out why when I am thrusting, let's bring up an example. Why when I'm thrusting, this is always happening? Why am I knocking the stand back a lot? Because that's destabilizing the tatami a lot and causing issues with my cutting and the stability of the tatami as I'm going through the feat. And I was looking at my footage and I couldn't really figure it out. So I asked some friends, and I think what I came up with, after listening to what they were saying, I think what's going on is I'm doing more of a sustained push of the sword rather than a quick thrust into the tatami. And the sustained push is impacting a lot of energy into the tatami and into the stand, knocking it back like that. So I need to work on doing a quick thrust rather than a sustained push with my whole body. And that should make the thrusts much cleaner and less problematic for the stability of the tatami. So in the end, I did not make it to the finals. I finished, I believe it was 6th or 7th. I was very, very happy with my first round. It was a very successful first round. First place after 2 feats. Very happy with that. My friend, I said, John Knock, the one to keep an eye on the name, he won the entire thing. He finished off the win with a absolutely perfect double cut. And I was so happy for him. He really deserved the win. I just was hoping to make it to the finals. I didn't. One of these days I will get I will develop enough reliability in my form and technique to make it to finals. Not there yet. Who knows? Maybe Fright Fight is coming up in a little bit over a month. I'm competing there. Hopefully I'll do well there. But that's pretty much all I had for this video. I want to say thank you to Dan and AJ for running this tournament. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting feats. I would have liked more tatami rather than paper, but the paper was actually interesting, especially the controlled cuts. That's something you can't really do on tatami, at least not to the same degree. So it's something interesting. It was a lot of fun of a tournament, and I really appreciate them running it. Until next time, Alien 2'd out.